A single prisoner altered the fate of hundreds, but he paid a high price for it. He is weak and has forgotten much, but he is alive. He's back.
Okay, who am I? I'm Michael Hoge. I am the lead designer of the Gothic series. I was asked to come here and talk about the development of the story of Gothic. In my humble opinion, the story of Gothic 1, for example, is not so great, but the setting was, and so I switched it half-half, like setting and story development of Gothic. That will be the topic of the talk. As a designer, in my humble opinion, you have to design like 3 games, tell 3 stories. The first idea is to get a grip on what you're actually doing, the game mechanics, what is the project you're working on. And the next idea is to have a story to tell to everyone who wants to talk about your game. And the last idea is to have a story that you can tell the guy who gives you the money. Right? And an example for this would be, which did I pick? The Tomb Raider series, for example. Everyone knows the original Tomb Raider, or has at least heard of it. When we speak about the game, it was a one-on-one conversion from the original Prince of Persia game to 3D. That was the idea of the game. They took all the puzzles, like literally every single puzzle, all the game mechanics, and put it in 3D. And then they got the character that was like a female Indiana Jones at that time, maybe. That would be a good way to communicate it. And to the money guys, they showed a picture with tits and guns on it, and it was sold. Right? So that's just I'm not saying that's the ultimate truth. I say this is a mechanism that I use to identify if it's a good idea or not. When we started working on the Gothic series, we had a vision that we wanted to do the RPG series in a 3D third-person setting. And that wasn't done before, not really. There were some action games, but not like a really hardcore role-playing game where you can run about and freely explore the world. So that's what we were planning to do. It was our first project, so it was not such a brilliant idea to start with an open-world RPG back then, but we didn't know. So we jumped right into it. And the things that convinced us about the Ultima series were that it was a free explorable world without borders. And it was a living world where people would have daily routines and such, and it was like a simulated living world in a way. And it was quite immersive, you can lose yourself in it. So the things that we wanted to change were, we wanted to be more down to earth. We didn't want to have like fancy fantasy speech. They were all very flowery at that time, the dialogues. We wanted to be more straight down to earth. We wanted to be a bit more alive even, if we could. So we decided to make the world denser and also much smaller, because we were aware of the technical limitations and also our own limitations in creating this. We wanted quest targets, enemies and items to be in place, so the whole world, the player would find everything quite from the start. Very few gating mechanisms, no invisible walls, gating through enemies rather than through other mechanisms. I mean, we had a few. You cannot enter the Sleeper's Temple, for example, before you can talk to the orcs, and they will only talk to you in chapter 4 and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, as I said, as few as possible. So we decided on rather have gating mechanisms where we have monsters that prevented the player from progressing. And you can run past them at any time. So it doesn't really work. But surprisingly, it does, because people tend to have a way of not doing this overly much, I guess. It isn't fun for them. So it kind of worked, I guess. Player decides where to go and who to kill. Was also a plan that we had, a very early plan, that we decided on not being able the other way around, being able to kill anyone, like you knock someone down and then you decide if you really want to do the finishing move or not. But then this guy is missing in the story, right? So the whole quest mechanics had to be written in a way that if someone was dead, people could refer to that. And that was quite a problem. So at the end of the day, we couldn't quite live up to it and had to immortalize some of the most important main story NPCs per flag, of course. But most of the world could be killed. I was observing a friend of mine when he played the game right after the release, and he went with a character called Mordrag from the old camp to the new camp. He wanted to show him the new camp because he wanted to convince him to join the camp. There was an NPC, he was going on and on how great it was, and come on, follow me, and he followed him. And in the middle of the woods, he just struck him down because he liked his bow. And he killed him, and he stole his bow, and then he played the game, and I thought, oh no, he just killed the whole quest line. But he had fun, he had his bow, and he was happy, and that's all what the game is about, right? Don't force the player to do what you want him to do, but rather let him the freedom to do what he himself wants to do. That was the philosophy of the game, and we didn't live up to it in overly many points, but at some points I think we did. The player guidance, of course, if you have a free world, is very problematic. In my opinion, if you have a crossroads, you come from one direction and there's 3 directions to go to. There's the obvious one, like when in Gothic 1 the player starts and goes down the path to the old camp, which is a very big castle with a surrounding little town. 60% of the players will go there, and 20% of the players will go left, and 20% of the players will go right. So every camp must be written in a way as if it was the first thing that the player entered. You cannot rely on linearity. You have to have certain linear events. I'll come to that later. But when it comes to locations, every location has to be designed in a way as if the player would enter there for the first time. We realized that very early in the game. Okay, the living world, how did we do that? Of course, the daily routines that we kind of stole from the Ultima series. And then we had this system at first quite elaborate, and you could in precise time of when people would start stuff and people would end stuff, so they could get up, sit down for 5 minutes, have their breakfast, get out of their hut, blah 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 blah. At the end of the day, nobody was around. When you entered the old camp, nobody was outside and doing stuff. And so we cut the whole breakfast thing, and we quickly realized that 3 major spots where an NPC is during the day is enough. He can, at that spot, do his work and shift a bit position. But when we go to what the player needs in order for it to feel good, I think still up to today, I would still go for the 3 spots, I work, I do something in the evening, maybe go to a bar or whatever, and then I go to bed. Another thing about daily routine was you got to find the characters. And because we decided on not having much HUD and not having much helping elements for the player, for example, markers where you can find NPCs on the map, we didn't do that. So if a NPC wanders around overly much, then you wouldn't find him to finish your quest or to trade your stuff. So we went at the end of the day for the 3 spots. Funny story is when it comes to AI, AI would have reactions like witnessing stuff. They would memorize when they see you murdered someone. They will memorize if you attacked them. They will memorize if you stole. And then if you came to them, they would say, I'm not talking to you, you are a thief. But then we realized that was also crap, because the player will have so many different situations in the game that when he finally comes back to the guy who he stole an apple from, and the guy is really mad and said, you are a thief, he wouldn't remember what he did. So you think it was a bug. It would feel like a bug to the player. So at the end of the day, we settled for murder. If you really killed someone, they would realize it, You would memorize it and react to it. But if you did like a small deed, it would only react in the instance they saw it. Yeah, monster behavior also part of the living world. Some monsters fight in groups, some are predators, some sneak up on you, some eat dead monsters that are lying around rather than following you. It's really simple stuff that you can do also in today's games, I guess, to make the world more plausible. But don't overdo it, because otherwise they will all eat themselves and then you have the lost items again. I didn't tell the story of the lost items. When I did the AI, we taught them to loot. So someone defeats the player goes down, he will take your ore and then say something like, "Thanks for the ore, your hero," and then move away. And then I thought it would be a good idea if they collected other items as well, like your dropped weapon or valuable stuff that was in the world. So I implemented that for experimental, that's an experimental feature, but it was kind of buggy and they could see the items through the walls. So what happened was they plundered the whole world. So one day the level department put all the items in the old camp, and when they wanted to check how it looked, they went in the game, the items were all gone. And they took a whole day to recreate the mistake. They thought there was some kind of data problem or whatever, and went back and looked what went wrong. But what happened really was the NPCs would like spot the items, go collect them all, put them in their pockets, and go back to their daily routines as if nothing happened. It was kind of fun. The world changes. This was also a vision that we had. But we ran out of time at the end, and when I come to the chapter section of this speech, there was really only one situation in the game where the game actually changed, where the game world actually changed, but that was due to lack of time. What is immersive? Immersive is really maybe the consequence of freely explorable world that feels kind of plausible, I guess. But what's also part of it is, in my humble opinion, you don't have much hard elements. You play with the game, you view your gaze as rather in the game and not on the hard elements. If you can manage that, it adds a lot to the immersivity of a game, in my humble opinion. And that has some follow-up design decisions. For example, what you see is what you get, right? So you don't have 1,000 numbers that depict how strong a monster is. So the biggest monster is the strongest, and the biggest weapon is the best. And there are so many simple things with which you can communicate stuff rather than numbers if you want to make a game feel good. And we went for that approach, and I think that worked quite well. We decided to not use a map, a conventional map, but rather to give the player the map as an item, so he has to find it, he has to buy it or steal it or whatever, come by it by whatever means, and he wouldn't have a map when he starts the game, so he's kind of lost. He needs to really explore the world, he needs to understand the world. If the level design is good, this works. The Souls series, the Dark Souls series, does it to the day. Elden Ring was an exception to this. But I think if the level design is good, it works, and it's a matter of taste, really. In my opinion, it's a better game, but it's my taste. Yeah, music is important, of course, for the immersion. Kai Rosenkranz did a very good job with the soundtrack of Gothic, and he was largely responsible for that the game felt the way that it did on that account. I wanted a bit more melancholy in it, and he did just that. He is such a great guy. Just drop a word and he'll do it and translate it into music. Feeling like I'm there is the bottom line. No, this game is 20 years old, and if you turn it on today, you won't have that feeling anymore, I guess. But back in the day, that was our goal anyway. Okay, talking about the hero. Our design decisions for the hero. We wanted a blank page. We wanted the hero to be definable by the player in a way. So we decided to give him no name and rather leave that open and have the player's fantasy work when it comes to defining the character. Then we wanted to the player to be very weak at the beginning, so that he can feel the pressure of getting better, the need to get better on him, and also that feels realistically if you're like thrown in another world and everyone's already there and everyone's already well equipped and knows what's going on, and you're not knowing what's going on, then it should reflect in the feeling that the player has in the game. The choice of faction at the beginning, when we decided on letting the player choose which faction he should have, we had very vague ideas of the player to be a magician or a sword fighter or fight with a bow, like you could in Diablo. That was a great thing back then, back in the day. So the vague idea of classes, but not more. Keep in mind, if you write dialogues for the hero, or if you design the game for the hero, you always design the game for the hero and the player, and it's two different things. So what the player wants or what the hero wants are two different things. And I'll give an example. There is a quest in Gothic 1 where the quest is to join the old camp and to get into the castle. And in order to do that, the hero needs some NPCs who vote for him. He needs to do good stuff in the camp, so people would vote for him and they can get into the castle. And that's what the hero wants. So one of the guys who should vote for him asks him to bring him his lost sword back. Very simple quest. Okay, bring the lost sword back. So you go to another NPC and tell him, okay, give me his sword. And then the guy asks you, who wants it? And then you can answer, I want it, or the other guy wants it. But they hate each other. And if you pay attention to the dialogue, you know that, so you give the right answer. You get the sword, you look at the sword, and then you see, oh, that's the best sword that I found so far. I want to keep it. And the player wants to keep the sword. But the hero wants to give the sword away because he wants to join the old camp. So you have to pay attention to those differences, and you can also play with it. And we did that. And because we knew the player would probably keep the sword, we added a timer to the quest, and when 3 days later, after you got the sword, 3 days later you would not have delivered it to the other guy. He would realize it, and when you walk by, he would say, hey, what are you doing? You have my sword, and then attack you, right? So to make the appearance of NPCs reacting in a plausible way. How do you formulate the dialogue? We thought about that as well. And when I did that, for example, I always imagined what does the player want most probably? What will he like to ask? What will he like to say? And it's really hard to guess it. You can have like a dozen different dialogue options to cover it all. That's lots of work, and if you want to have speech output, it's very expensive. Or the better version, in my humble opinion, is you are writing in a way that's not presumptuous. So, for example, would you like to join the old camp? The player is asked, and he would say, and what if I would like it? So you can interpret this answer in the way you want. Like if you are positive to the old camp, it's an okay answer. If you're negative to the old camp, it's also an okay answer. And this is how the style of the player dialogue was developed. We just got our first Euros. We got a programming team that came and contacted us, and they had some engine that they called the Finster engine, and they wanted to do Ultima Underworld again. And then I said, no, let's rather do Ultima 6 in 3D, that's so much better. And they said, no, we can't do it, are you insane? And I said, yes, this, either this or nothing. And well, at the end of the day, they agreed. They knew better, actually, but anyway. So we sat down and worked on the setting. We knew we wanted a small world. We knew we wanted like I said, what was the idea of the game? Living world, not too large, so we needed a limit, right? There is no other idea. Maybe we can put a magic barrier around it. Yeah, but the magic barrier would need to be there for a reason. It would need to be a story element in order to be plausible, because we want to make a believable world. We cannot just put an invisible wall around it. We said we wouldn't do that. So what's the magic barrier for? What kind of reason could be there to put a magic barrier around a kilometer of space? And then we brainstormed, and then it was the idea of the prison mine colony. The prison colony was the first idea, and then later we developed the idea with the mines, and then came the idea with the magic ore, and then came the first draft of the map, where just a circle was scribbled down, and an old camp, and a new camp, and a sec camp. They weren't named like that. It was just a castle, a cave, and a swamp with some huts in it, and a tower of the demon summoner, because it sounded good, and some mines. Okay, and then we went up talking about the good idea. This is the definition that came up later, because Tom Putsky, the guy who wanted to sell the stuff that we were making, because we had only the initial money, we had like 300,000, I guess, and we gave it all to our first employees. We paid ourselves nothing, and we gave the whole money to the people who we hired. And to be able to hire more, we told them, how about you work for half the money so we can hire twice as many people, and you get it all back when we are successful. How about that? Crazy thing is, they all said yes, and so we founded the company with really nothing. So when Tom was trying to sell the game, trying to find someone who gives us money for it, we came to the point where he said, okay, this is a great idea, this is a great game, but how do we sell it? I can't sell it. I start to talk and say we make a fantasy game, and it's like no one else did before, and then you have this prison mine colony and the magic ore and the sleeper and blah 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 blah, and they all fall asleep. They don't want to hear it. They want to have some short elevator pitch. And so we came up with this Escape from New York plus fantasy, and they said, yes, that's what I can sell. And it worked, right? So the press started to write about us. And then some money guys saw the press articles, and they thought, hey, wow, the guys are in the press, they must be good, let's give them money. Sounds funny, but it was like that back in the day. It was the Wild West, the camps. So we had the camps, and what we did as first design steps for the camps was we decided on the architecture of camps. So what they needed to be different, of course. So one is, like I said, a castle, one is a camp in the swamp, one is a cave. The history of camps, so which camp was there first, how did it develop, and from the history of camps, the history of the world developed. But I think even if you do a relative complex setting like Gothic, if you come to the history bit, one page of history information is sufficient. Like who came first, who came then, when the war with the orcs started, when the barrier was created, when Xardas moved out of the old camp. Those points, they were the very important points in the story, but one page of history should be sufficient. The economy of the camps, of course. So the old camp would be the guys who want to keep the ore in, and the new camp would be the guys who want to bring the ore out. No, other way around. The old camp wants to bring the ore out, the new camp wants to bring the ore in. Conflicting escape plans were also a topic when we designed the camps very early. So we had, of course, we needed some conflict. There was a prison mine colony, there was bound to be conflict, people had to quarrel about stuff. So we came up with this very simple plan. One camp wants all the ore out, one camp wants all the ore in, and one camp doesn't care about the ore but wants to have the people from the other camps because they want to summon the sleeper. Okay, when we designed the factions, after we were sure about what we wanted to do with the camp, we designed the factions, and then we had those faction sheets, just one page for each faction, where mainly the most useful thing about that was to put one quote in there. How would an archetypical fire mage judge an archetypical ore baron? How would an archetypical water mage judge an archetypical digger, whatever? So just one sentence, one quote from each guild, from each faction, for every other faction. That were what, like 14 or 15 different sentences times 15. Sounds tedious, but it's really good, because if you then develop the characters and develop the relations between the characters, it really helps, and it helps a lot more, in my humble opinion, than having like a character diamond for every character or whatever. It's not so important. 1-2 bullet points per character are sufficient. When we did the factions, we also did, for the larger factions, we did archetypes for the larger factions. For example, the diggers were quite big factions, so when it came to writing characters, we just decided, okay, what is the most plausible reason for a human being to become a digger? I'm either too old and cannot join the guard anymore, or too young, too weak. Because there's better jobs, right? But the better jobs in the prison world are taken by the stronger guys. So what would it be? It would be either too old or too young, or you maybe are recovered by character, or you are just a dropout and you don't want to play their game. And those were the characters that were defined on those pages as well. When we developed the story, and we wanted to have like the world believable, and we decided on, okay, what happened? There's a magic barrier, and there is a king outside, and he needs the ore from the prison mine colony, and the thing is self-governed, and all the guards are dead. Okay, so far so good. How would they have done it? They would have erected a magic barrier, then some mages would come, open it, throw someone in, close it again, job well done. That was the first idea. But we wanted magicians to be in the prison. But that wouldn't work. So, because they could like get out, why wouldn't they get out? Are they visitors? They just come every week or what? No, it doesn't work. We need them to be an element of the society. Okay, so what we did was we just changed the properties of the magic barrier, and we came up with something very spleeny. We just decided, okay, the ore needs to go in and out, and the wares needs to go in or out, and people just need to go in. So the solution was inorganic matter can cross freely, and organic matter can't go out. Now that's weird. There needs to be a reason for that. Yeah, maybe something intervened with the magic. Yeah, that could be some evil creature. Oh yeah, and then the idea of the sleeper was born, and so kind of, in a way, the story told itself. It developed itself because we wanted to stick true to our plan, right? So the elements kept popping out, and we put them in. And we creatively decided how to progress from there. We changed stuff, but we tried to change as little as we could. So we had the beginning of the game and the ending of the game, because we were had just invented the sleeper, right? So we knew, okay, it's a computer game. Of course, you will need to kill a boss at the end. It was out of the question back in the day. So I think it's still true. So we had the boss. And then we had the player would be thrown in the prison, because of course it's the beginning of the game, players thrown in the prison, and at the end you have to defeat the sleeper. Okay, so we got the alpha and the omega of the story, and we just had to fill the gaps. And we had the living world, and so we thought, okay, what would happen? What's the plan of the sleeper? What does the sleeper do? He's like a sleeping thing from maybe some kind of Lovecraftian idea, I guess, where some very powerful being is dreaming or trying to manipulate reality. He's not really awake. If he's awake, oh my God, but now he's sleeping, but that's worse, that's bad enough, right? So we are actually planning to have the world change through stages, and we call them chapters. And the further the game progressed, the grimmer the world would be. That was the actual plan. So things would go wrong. People would try to attack them, get aggressive, attack themselves, fight amongst the prisoners. The orcs would be driven out of the underworld. The orcs are on the surface map of Gothic 1 at the end of the day. And there is some dungeon part to it, but in the original concept, the world was layered. And you would have to fight through dungeon layers to get to the sleeper. We scratched all that because we ran out of time, really. So the chapter layout was early, but we had to cut down. And there's, due to this reason, sadly, practically no side quest after chapter 1. But somehow the game was kind of a success anyway, so I'm very happy about this. Because at the time we needed to ship it, it felt a bit sad, really, and half done. In the first chapter, you really needed to select your class, so we made out of this join a camp, and then after that, the game becomes very linear. The first chapter is by far the most elaborate one, and after that, the story becomes quite linear, so no matter what you decide in the first chapter, you will always go to Iberion's ritual and help him do it. And after that, you will always go to the third chapter, and only in chapter 4 the world really changes. And that's, like I said, due to lack of time, sadly. But what we did do, and what we kind of also stole from Ultima series, in the Ultima series, there was only those companions of the player, namely. So these would be characters that you meet again in the next game, that you know, that feel like friends. And we wanted to implement something like this. And so we came up with the idea of the 4 friends, Diego and Milton and Lester and Gorn, who would help you in the most important main quests, and who were supposed to appear in a game, Gothic 2, should it ever be produced. So that's also a design decision that came quite early. We didn't know what we would do with all the ore that the new camp had collected. There was this massive heap of ore. They wanted to blow it all up, to blow the magic barrier up. Every camp has its own escape plan. And then we decided to use it to load the weapon that you kill the final boss with. And that idea came very, very late. In the last couple of months, the last 4 months of the development, I guess. And we made the cutscene and we put all that in, and it just clicked together. There was just 2 loose ends that we connected to have the story told at that end. When we were planning the story is to make sure, because it was like an open world, and the player could go anywhere, and the player could do almost anything. We need to convey a couple of informations that are very important, otherwise the player would not understand what the end is about, right? Like I felt when I played Elden Ring. There was this like massive thing, but what did it really mean? I don't know. Game was still fun. But so we try to make sure that in every chapter of the game, the player would know, okay, what is the sleeper? There are these sect lunatics, they're talking about the sleeper, that will help him, so he's kind of the sect god. Later, he realizes it's the escape plan. They pray to him because they want him to lower the barrier. And then later, he realizes when Iberion has his final vision, he's in fact a deceiving demon, and he can't be trusted, and he's the evil guy. And later, you see it's not like some spiritual existence that they pray to, but it's really physically there. It's here, it's a threat. And then you learn the means to defeat him. And so we made sure that those informations were conveyed. And this is what we did with the main story. And that's about all the things we forced upon the player, and the rest we wanted to be his own free decision. Well, what we always try to do is we have like phases. If it all runs smoothly, you should be able to design the title with very few people, because you can put creatives on all you want. There will be all the more disagreement. It's better to have a small design team, in my humble opinion, with few experts of each department, maybe, and then really boil down the idea, come up with the design concept, decide on what you want to prototype, what you want to decide on early, and have that, and then stack up on that, a bit bigger team, do the first prototyping, and then when you know what you're doing, then you hire the guys to actually do it. And the problem was at Piranha Bytes, in Gothic 1 we grew too early, and so it was more like work therapy really, because things had to be done 2 or 3 times, and everyone was like producing, and much was thrown into the bin, and that's frustrating. And yeah, my only advice is keep the team as small as you can. I am aware of the fact that smaller companies often don't have that luxury, so you finish one title and then you go to the next. But you need to try to break out of that circle. Maybe let some part of the company work on some add-on data or whatever. It's easy to start on a project and not be clear. You have to ask yourself certain questions. You have to really clarify on what the game is about. Put that in 4 sentences max. And then you can look if any idea that pops in fits into this. Is it really adding up to the core idea? Or is it just some fancy thing that we can maybe do later? Then do that later. And that's how I would recommend focusing. Are you in a position to let them do stuff? Can they do their own time estimates? Can you go and say, okay, you want to put all those features in, please give me a time estimate, how much programming or whatever, or how much work you would put in each of those points, and then come back to you, and then you just add them up and show them that's 73 years, it can't work, so what do we cut out?
Hi, thanks for the talk. It was very, very nice to see the idea behind the game. That was my childhood's game. So yeah, my question more on the personal side, kind of fun side. Do you have any character that you feel the most like you identify with the most? I don't know, Diego, Gomez, or Xardas, or anybody, and why? Or yeah, why do you like them? What's cool about those characters? Either from any Gothic from the series.
Yeah, okay. Obviously, I like the Diego character and the Xardas character. I think most of the well-known ones, but also some side characters can be nice. Let's think. For example, in Gothic 2, the workers from the town that you can be an apprentice to. And this is partly taken from my youth, because before I created computer games I worked as a carpenter, right? And then there was my old master, and he was a kind of I don't know the English word. He was kind of fuck. My English is so bad. Anyways, what I did is I have my own experiences put into the character. So I have a certain picture of a character when I write him, and in a way I must relate to all of them, but because I would like them to be plausible, right? So.
So you'd say some of them were real life based, right?
Come again?
They were real life based, like some from your real life experiences?
Yeah, of course, but only parts of that, right? And so I really like features about every character, I guess, in a way, or can relate to them. It's really hard to pick It's really hard to pick some.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hard to pick favorites.
I think who I also did like was Kor Anga from Gothic 1, because he was so devoted to Immersion. He was the only guy who had real faith in him. I mean, he would never waver. It was kind of good. The game didn't transport it very much. I think sometimes the characters are more for yourself in your own head than the game really transports, because they are not that important to the story. They don't get so much time. But you have a certain picture of it and it's just great, but the game just doesn't deliver it. It also happens.
Thank you.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but tell me, are you caution how much the Gothic series is cult and glorified in Poland?
Yeah, I'm getting aware of it.
Okay, I'm glad to hear.
I had to cut back on the talk a bit, but one of the points that I was going to make is the game was developed in 3 years and 4 months, and the main part of the story, about 80% of the game, literally, not the technical programming that was ongoing, the engine development and all that, but the content of the game was done. 80% was done in the last 4 months, actually. The combat AI, most of the dialogues, most of the quests, and so forth, even the daily routines. We got all the systems in place, and then we had a plan, and then we just executed it with 80-hour weeks. We realized we wouldn't make it, so we needed to cut down, and we did that, and we barely made it, because, let me give you one example. There was this guy in front of the new camp, I don't know his name, maybe Lefty, and he lets you deliver water to the pawns, to the peasants who are getting the rice, and if you don't do it, he just strikes you down. And every time you go there, he says, the peasants look thirsty, do it again, and do it again. And then you can strike him down and he will stop, but there was a missing part of a dialogue. You could, in the final version, you could go to him and say, after you defeat him for the first time, you could pick the dialogue option, the peasants look thirsty, and he said, okay, I'm at it. But there was missing, nearly missing, it was one of the last sentences that I put into the game, even in the recording studio. We weren't supposed to change any dialogues, and I was burning the midnight oil to put the last missing sentences in that I really wanted to be in the game. It was that close, it was insane. I mean, it was our first project, right? Yeah. So Gothic 2, I think, was a bit better. Still had some bugs, but not far as many as Gothic 1. And Gothic 2 we did in 11 months, from start to end, so concept and all. We decided on, okay, let's tell the story of the 4 dragons that need to be slain, so everyone could start working on that. And then develop the story and the setting for Gothic 2 parallel. And then put up the rest of the world, because we really ran out of money after Gothic 1, because we spent too much time on it. And then we need to really rush Gothic 2. And we did it in 11 months, and without the 80 hours weeks. Because we focused on the important things, right? And we didn't grasp for the stars. We just keep it simple, stupid, do it again, improve on the points. Let's see how much work it is really. And then Gothic 2, there it is. For starters, the Night of the Raven add-on for Gothic 2 was developed parallel to Gothic 3. There was a mistake. We were a very small company, only 20 people. We should have focused on doing one thing. By dividing our forces, Gothic 3, at the beginning, there were some people missing that are working on the add-on, right? So you don't have the creative pool that you would need to get the thing started, so we got delayed there. And that was very, very much a problem at the end, because the publisher that we had back in the day, he needed to release. That was a stock market business, and they needed their numbers. They would have sold it no matter how good or how bad it was. We weren't finished. It was our fault, but they really literally grabbed the game under our bloody fingernails and shipped it, and would take another year to make it the game I wanted to make it. Another sad story, but taught me a lesson not to do business with those kind of guys anymore. Anyway, I'm not saying we were innocent. We did our part in it.
Well, I would like to ask about incoming Gothic remake, and two short questions about that. The first one is, what for is this game? For what kind of people? I mean, this is for the old players who love this world, to retell the whole story for them, or it's rather, in your opinion, for new generations of players, which says...
I can't say. I haven't played it yet. I have seen it. I bet I'm not supposed to talk about it. They were friendly enough. I was in Barcelona for like 2 months ago. They showed me the game. It looked good. I loved the level design. They are still working on some things, and it would depend on how those things turn out at the end. I really can comment on the final title. They are on a good way, I can say so much. And if they do it or not, we will see at the end. And then I can say for who the game will be, right?
Okay, so
what their plans are, I don't know. What they think about it, I don't know. We didn't talk about this, right?
So there is no sense of asking you now, is Gothic remake will gain such a success like the old one?
No. It can be both. It depends on will they be funded enough, right? Imagine this: they have a year left, and they barely make it. They need like half a year more. Will they get the money to do this? Is one factor, for example. There's a lot of factors, right? So we'll have to wait.
So I hope it will be a success. Thank you.
I hope so as well. I'd rather see it be a success than fail. I mean, even when we did Gothic 2, there was such a thing as patches, and everybody was aware of it, right? It's not like we couldn't patch the game. I think it is also a kind of a developer's pride to ship a game which does actually work. That would be nice. I think it's a good thing that games can be patched. It's a good thing that we know more about game systems so that we can design them in a way that patching is not needed in most cases, I think. And people should do that. And otherwise, it doesn't really matter, in my humble opinion. But I mean, it's good that we have the possibility to do so. But every developer should strive for a game that actually works, right? Do you know Hollow Knight, the game? That's a good example. This is a good example in game design. It's a good example in combat design. It's a good example in music design, sound design, all that. This is a very great example of what you can do with a game, even nowadays, even with a small game like this, and it works, and people will not. Even it would have one bug, nobody would care, because they really put their soul into it, right? This is not just some, hey, come on, let's do FIFA 17, whatever, 381 part of something that has been done before. That's one of the reasons that I left Piranha Bytes during Risen 2, because I was fed up with repeating myself and doing the same thing over and over again. So let's have more faith, let's have more courage, let's do some games that maybe nobody tried before. But you need the money for it, right? So this can be done with smaller games more easily. Nobody will give you the money to have a massive tryout in a massive game that will not sell, right? It's not reasonable. But still, it can be done, and that's the most important thing. It's not about the bugs, it's about the soul, really. First, and it hasn't changed in over 20 years, the first thing that goes wrong, the most important error, is communication. The game designer doesn't communicate his idea properly, and the chain goes to every department. You need to communicate, you need to clarify, you need to communicate in a way that can easily be understood. And if I say Escape from New York meets fantasy, it might be faulty, it might be not accurate, but it conveys the idea. And you have to be on the lookout for that as a designer. You need to convey your idea to the guy who gives you money, to the press who streams about you, to the employees that you have. And they all talk their own language, even programmers and artists. I once, as a producer for, I don't know what it was, I think it was Gothic 3, I was also kind of in a producing role then. I put the programmer and the graphic artist in one room for 2 hours, and they should work on a system. And they had this lengthy discussion, and at the end of the 2 hours they came out of the room and both were convinced they understood perfectly what the other one was talking about, but they didn't. Those guys managed to talk like this for 2 hours without realizing it, right? So everybody has his own language. Your job as a producer is to be the translator. Your job as a designer is to keep in mind who you want to convey the idea to and what you need in order to do so, and what will stick, what will snap, what are they looking for, right? And the example with the 3 different games aims about that. Be aware of the fact that you're not only making a game that the player will be loving once he decided to play it, but also a game that the player want to install on his hard drive in order to try it out. And maybe also a game that someone who doesn't know games at all, because that goes, and I don't know what they're teaching at the academies these days, but I can tell you one thing: the guys with the money, they don't know shit about games in most cases. Yeah, they rarely play themselves. Maybe they have played Red Dead Redemption for a couple of hours and then that's it. So you need to come up with different arguments there. Thank all of you.